Hello, you are listening to From Maclay Street to Zama. I'm your host, Karen Miller. This podcast is about the adventures of two women from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, who worked for the U.S. Army at Zama, Japan. Their stories are told through hundreds of letters written home. Hello, welcome to episode 4 of From Maclay to Zama. This episode will include letters 7 and 8, written from the Pacific Ocean. I'm starting this episode with some biographical information about the patriarch and matriarch of the Harnish family. Thanks for listening. We're going to start with the small borough of Huntington, Pennsylvania, near Altoona. It's located on the gorgeous Juniata River. John Duffy Harnish was born there in January of 1880. His parents were Frank and Eliza Jane Harnish. Frank was a laborer. Eliza Jane was a housewife. This was railroad country at this time. I did some research into the history of the Pennsylvania Railroad here in central Pennsylvania, and Altoona was sure a very busy place. By the time he was living in Altoona on Oak Street, and he grew up there. Altoona was originally an Iroquois confederacy until the first settlers arrived in the mid-1700s. By 1831, the main line of the Pennsylvania Canal was extended to Hollidaysburg, and the canal was connected to the Allegheny Portage Railroad in 1834. The mountainous terrain and wide Juniata River made it difficult to complete the East-West Railroad across Pennsylvania. Through innovative engineering and a lot of hard work by Irish immigrants over the course of 3 years, Horseshoe Curve was built to replace the tedious task of hoisting boats from the canal onto primitive rail cars to take them over the Allegheny mountain ridge. This reduced the travel time between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh from 3 days to 15 hours. By the mid-1800s, the owner of the Allegheny Furnace, which was part of the iron making there, built this gorgeous mansion called the Baker Mansion, and it was an impressive 3-story stone Greek Revival home on top of a hill. I took the video tour, and you can tour it as well, and it looked really great. Between 1854 and 1880, the population boomed from 2,000 people to 20,000, and the town was a commercial center for the region. Lyswyn, which was a Welsh name named for a lovely village on the River Wye in Wales, was a planned community built in the early 1900s and became the site of a 14,000 worker railroad yard with 3 roundhouses. Think Thomas the Tank Engine. And the primary locomotive construction facility for the state. By 1930, the population of Altoona peaked at 82,000 residents. But after World War II, the interstate highway system moved industry and commerce away from that area, which ironically didn't get a link to the interstate until the 1990s. So it's no surprise that when John married his first wife, Myrtle Rebecca Landis, on June 14, 1905, his occupation was listed as being an employee electrician for the Pennsylvania Railroad Company. And he was at that point of their marriage working in Harrisburg. I have seen photos of Myrtle and her 5 sisters. Bern certainly took after that side of the family. Myrtle was born in Altoona in 1882, and the home where she grew up and was married to John at 611 Fifth Avenue is still there. In fact, it was Bern that spoke most often of Altoona, because when Myrtle died when Bern was 1 year old. She spent time with Myrtle's family, specifically her sisters May and Ruth, there in Altoona when she was young, and spent summers there during her childhood. I've heard conflicting stories about Myrtle's death. My mother thought that she had some sort of lung ailment, and that she had been away maybe in a hospital or something. but other family members said she had a sudden heart attack while riding a city bus. So I found her obituary in the Altoona paper. It says she died at home on June 9th, 1921. Either way, it left John with twin boys born in 1906, a son born in 1909, my grandmother, who was born in 1913, and newborn Aunt Bern, born in 1920. I can't imagine what it must have been like for him. I do know that his older sister, Aunt May, moved in with them and helped him with the children. In either 1924 or 25, he married 28-year-old Helen Mildred Robinson. I didn't find out until I was talking with Aunt Peg's cousin at her funeral that Helen, also called Hunnen by my mother and number 9 by my brother and I, had attended a one-room Amish school for her education. What I did know was that her family owned a gorgeous farm that I remember visiting as a child, and that her beautiful smile, great cooking, especially the German chocolate cake, and hugs made my mother and I feel very loved. To explain the number 9 moniker, when my brother was born, she figured out that she would be the ninth relative to get the opportunity to hold him. And so the number 9 just stuck for the rest of her life with us. Helen fed my mom often during her childhood. My grandparents always lived near Helen and John. She taught my mom to cook hearty Amish food, and when I was little, I remember watching her foot pedal the very old antique sewing machine. She always wore white socks and very sensible black leather shoes. When I got older, I would get to brush her lovely, long, soft white hair. She always smelled like ivory snow, and her hair was always put up with combs and braids in a very certain way by her daughters. As she got older, she would sit in John's rocking chair and rub the wooden arm of it like she was caressing him. By my childhood, the arm of that chair was very smooth. I was blessed to have her with me until my freshman year of college. John died in November of 1957, not long after Bern and Peg returned from Japan. My mom talked about him so much. He taught her how to drive. He spent a lot of time with her, and she loved it when he would play his song on the piano. We've never figured out exactly what the song is, but I have a recording of Peg playing it, so with the advent of AI, we might be able to finally solve that mystery. Pa, as she called him, was active in the Lutheran Church. At some point in his career, he was injured in an accident at the railroad yard. I have the idea that he fell off of an electric pole. Anyway, he injured his leg and always walked with a cane, which is now resting in my closet. He loved to read Frank Yerby books, and I found out a little bit about Frank Yerby today. He was an African-American author, one of the first ones that was popular, just general popular writer. He wrote historical fiction, and my grandfather had a whole collection of his books, which I have some of now. My mother read them when she was young, and then I read them when I was young. I was surprised to find out that Frank Yerby did not pass away until 1991, so he must have been a young man if he was popular during my great-grandfather's time. Sometime when my mom was in high school, there was a party at their house that John and Helen had shared with Bern and Peg, and Mom was upstairs, and suddenly she heard Pa's song being played on the piano in the basement. She thought John was playing it and burst into tears. I think that's the story that taught me how grief feels. Another story my mom liked to tell was that Helen and John took in boarders who came for the Pennsylvania Farm Show, which was just a little bit farther down McClay Street from their home at 526. And they kept a big stack of mattresses in the back hallway of their home that my mother used to play on and jump on, and I guess that was just something the kids did when the mattresses weren't being used for the farm show. Guess. Well, it's time now for letter number 7, and it was written July 2nd, 1953. Hi, family. On this, our 3rd day at sea, your in-between child is 33 years old. Strange, one doesn't feel a bit different than yesterday when one was 32. However, at this stage, I'm not exactly sure what date it is. Every night before we go to bed, the ship's loudspeaker reminds us to set our watches back 1 hour. Stop me if I'm wrong, but now, when it is 11 o'clock a.m. here, is it 4 p.m. in your fair city? One of the crew told us that this has been the smoothest crossing of the season. I'll knock on wood for luck, but neither Peg nor I have suffered even a remote symptom of seasickness. In fact, one night on the train to Seattle was much worse than anything on the ship so far. Keep your fingers crossed for us. We've been told by one of the wives who has made several of these trips that the ship we are on is the luxury liner of these American Army transports. It is very comfortable. The food is excellent, with a surprisingly large variety of things to choose from. There are 2 large comfortable lounges, a record player, books and board games galore, plenty of card players who are just waiting to interest you in a game, and movies every night. Last night we had a community sing-along. Tonight, bridge and canasta tournaments. Nevertheless, the hours drag by. It's a very limited life. The cabin is very small, and we are down on B deck, which makes it too warm and noisy to make a nap go very easy. The weather thus far has been real cold. We walked on the promenade deck, bundled to the teeth in slacks, sweaters, and topcoats. However, we've been told that in a few days it will become much warmer, and Ibi, our charming Japanese co-traveler, assures us that when we arrive in Japan, we'll be wishing for this cold weather. Helen, your faith in today's young people would take an extra confidence if you could see the hundreds of young GI wives who are making this trip with us, with 1, 2, up to 6 children in their families. The children are underfoot all the time, sometimes really well behaved, at other times fretful, crying, noisy, whiny, and very unhappy at this strange upset to their daily lives. It has been very interesting to watch the manner in which the different mothers handle them. Very educational. Sometime ask me about it. There are between 40 and 50 civilian workers like ourselves on board. We share a cabin with 2 others. Tell Nancy I'm on the top bunk. They come from all parts of the country. Barbara from Boston, Velma from Virginia, Terry from St. Louis, Ginny from Pittsburgh, Ginny from Washington, quite a few from New York City and vicinity, and 1 gal from Seattle. About half of them have worked for Uncle Sam before. The others are new recruits from the outside. Everyone's very friendly, and there's no lack of companionship anytime you want it. So far, I've only managed to read 1 book, and that was a most enjoyable one. You 2 who enjoyed The Robe and The Big Fisherman, it is called, you would be interested in this biography of Dr. Douglas by his 2 daughters. It's called The Shape of Sunday. It's very well written. I don't usually go in for biography, but this is good. Isabel could probably get it for you if you're interested in buying it. Let's see. Did any of your company arrive yet? Something else. What date does Nancy go to camp? I know it's sometime in July, but I've forgotten when. I could send her a letter there if I knew the date. Maybe I'll take a chance and send one anyway. Do take time out and have fun while the kids are home. I picture you having a good old-fashioned picnic like we used to do so often. I'll be interested in finding out whether the Japanese go in for picnics. We've been told we will arrive next Friday, which will make it about 11 days at sea. Hope the library holds out that long. A trip to the head is indicated at this time, so I'll quickly close. Ask Mark to explain if you don't know. Lots of love to you all. Bern. The Nancy that they refer to in their letters was my mom, who was 11 or 12 years old when they left. And she attended the same Lutheran camp that Bern and Peg had attended and had worked at. So their camp songs were a part of everyone's childhood, the same silly songs that they learned at that camp and sang with all of us. The next letter is letter number 8 from Aunt Peg, written July 5th, 1953, and says, quote, "I haven't the faintest idea where. Hi, I wish this darn ship would hold still. What's it like to walk on firm land? I've forgotten by this time. Last Friday, 9/10 of the people on board were seasick. It was certainly a sad sight, people holding their little cartons for dear life and wishing they were dead. I managed, and just managed, to keep everything down, but Bern didn't do quite so well. She upchucked once, but then she was at least alive for the rest of the day. There was a lady on board with 6 kids, and another woman saw her in the middle of her kids in their room trying to get them to sing, trying to make them forget about being sick, and she was so sick herself that the perspiration just rolled off of her. Honestly, I don't think I could do it. You certainly have to hand some of these women a lot of credit, but I'd love to strangle some of their kids. However, we are all feeling better slowly. It goes a little easier every day, and maybe after it's over, I will be able to laugh about it. Mother, I miss your cooking so much that it's a crime. One evening, Bern and I stood on the deck and planned menus for you to cook when we come home. Right now, I'd still take your cooking. I'd give anything for a barbecue cottage hamburger with everything. Oh my gosh, the food here is good, but after 3 meals, everything tastes alike. And it's actually a struggle to walk into the mess saloon and smell it. So far, I haven't missed a meal, but it's been sheer force of my part to go in. At least I ought to lose that 10 pounds I'm always moaning about, right? I honestly don't think I'll be hungry, really hungry, until I get home. I'm eating to live, not living to eat. Last night we had a dance. The Filipino stewards have a band, and they played from 8 to 9 p.m. Then a band from the troops down below that we are carrying played until 11 p.m. Of course, there were many, many more women than men, but this kid did all right for herself. 12 sergeants from below were invited to attend this great social function. The big jerks wouldn't ask anyone to dance at first, so Velma, a character from Virginia, and I asked them to dance. Well, that started the ball rolling for Velma and I. I danced everyone but one. How about that? Those sergeants were only supposed to dance twice with one girl, but Junior danced 6 or 7 times with me. He's a little sergeant from Warren, Pennsylvania, and he said he liked to dance with me rather than the other girls because their feet were too big. But I could have died. Before the dance started, Velma and I were talking about this one colored sergeant and a white one. The colored sergeant was the band leader, and before the dance started, he came back to me and said he wanted the first dance with me. Well, I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to insult the fella, but golly, I didn't know how to get out of it. So I asked an officer's wife what to do, and she told me it was perfectly all right to dance with him, and that I should. Another officer's wife agreed with her, so when he wanted me to do the jive, I did it. He was a really good dancer, too. He asked me to dance again, but then he found a colored girl to dance with, and I was glad. But just count on me to get in a mess like that. It never fails. Today we went to church. We even had communion. It was pretty nice, but the chaplain made us stand to sing, and I would have rather sat. This afternoon we have some kind of initiation for going over the international date line. When we go to bed tonight, Sunday, we'll wake up on Tuesday. Isn't that nice? I wish we'd wake up on Friday in Yokohama, though. And I think I looked forward to a summer cruise. I have big rocks in my head. Love and kisses, Peg. P.S. Tell everyone to write and hug Blondie for me. At this point, there's a couple things I need to explain and an issue I'd like to address. First of all, the Nancy that's referred to was my mom, and my mom was 11 or 12 when they left for Japan. She was very excited about the trip, but also missed them terribly. And the other issue is there's some racial comments made in this letter and in other letters that some are just outright disturbing, and this one more just reflects what the societal norms were around a black man and a white woman dancing. They both addressed how this was very different from the way things were in Harrisburg. And in many cases, they say things that indicate that they were just surprised. So I don't want any of my listeners to be offended. I'm going to keep their comments in the letters. And I think we just have to understand that a lot of what they say was just a function of what life was like in 1953 in America. Another thing that I noticed when I first began reading these letters was how the two sisters portrayed the same events so drastically differently. So Bern is talking about how the ocean is smooth and everything's fine. There's some kids, but it's okay. And then 2 days later, Peg is full on describing their seasickness and what sounds like lots of badly behaved children that she was having trouble tolerating. So I thought that was hilarious. I think that this is how I learned how truly different the two sisters were with these stories. And I find that hearing them describe the same situations from their two different perspectives is just fascinating to me. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Next time, we're going to have some more letters, and I'll be giving you biographical information on my Aunt Peg and my Aunt Bern. Have a good week. There's